I have a love and hate relationship with the Rode VideoMic Pro and the Sennheiser MKE400. Now, they both perform very well in some scenarios, but poorly in others. Now, it gets bad with one of them at some point that I end up using a couple of washers and electrical tape to get the sound right. Can you guess which one? Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Simon. Thanks for tuning in to The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you're new here, subscribe to get notification of new videos like this one so you don't miss any news, rumors, or tutorials. And by the way, I'm giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera to one lucky viewer. Details are in the description down below, or you can watch this video here, but essentially, all you have to do is subscribe for your chance to win. I've owned the Rode VideoMic Pro and the Sennheiser for some time. The VideoMic Pro for 8 months and the Sennheiser for about 7 years. Now, they're both sold as shotgun mics intended for fun and gun and event work, and they're for use with DSLRs or mirrorless cameras. But with this little adapter here, this TSR adapter, they can be adapted to work with smartphones and iPads. So if you're trying to hook it up to an iPad or an iPhone or some other smartphone, you find it doesn't work, it's because you need this TSR adapter, and they're about 20 bucks. While each mic produces decent sound in most scenarios, for most ordinary filmmakers, I wouldn't recommend either of them for professional use. They have too large of a polar pattern for professionals. And what's a polar pattern, you might be asking? Well, a polar pattern is just simply a map, and what that map shows is how well a microphone records sound from the front, the sides, and the back. And it shows the strength of the signal that can be captured at each of those angles. This is a polar pattern for the Sennheiser MKE400. 0 degrees is right out in front. 90 degrees is directly to the left and right of the mic, and 180 degrees is behind the mic. Now, at 0 degrees, we can see that the lines touch at 0. The dark line represents the loudness of the signal. The further out from the center, the louder the audio that's picked up. The Sennheiser MKE400 is very strong out from the front to about 60 degrees on either side. Audio strength really drops off to the sides and behind, as we'll see once we get outside. Looking at the Rode VideoMic Pro, it doesn't pick up as strong in the front, and it isn't as wide, but it's stronger than the Sennheiser from behind. Most professionals want a much narrow cardioid pattern, just focusing on the person directly in front of the mic. Now, let's see how well they perform outside. It's an overcast day, there's not a lot of noise in the background, it's pretty quiet, and I'm about 3 feet away from the Rode VideoMic Pro. I want to tell you a couple of settings that I have. Now, it doesn't have a whole lot of settings. Now, right on the back of the Rode is you have the power button, and just swing that all the way over, and that turns on the high-pass filter, and that's what I have set on right now. Then immediately below that is where you have your dB level, and I really love this capability. Most cameras, DSLRs and mirrorless, even on a Canon EOS R5, the preamp isn't the greatest, so I like to not rely on it whenever I can. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've turn this on to the Rode VideoMic Pro onto 20 dB. The options are 20, 0, and -10. And then within the Canon EOS R5, what I've gone ahead and done is taken the camera off auto sound, put it on manual, and dial that preamp all the way down. So that's what I have done. It's 20 dB. So let's hear how it sounds. I'm about 3 feet away right now. I'm going to walk around to the side, and what you're going to notice as I walk around to the side is the audio is going to drop off significantly. I'm actually still 3 feet away at 90 degrees. Now I'm going to walk to the rear because I know it's going to be very hard to hear me. I'm going to walk pretty quickly through the leaves. And so now I'm standing at 180 degrees behind the Rode VideoMic Pro. So it picks up the audio here a little bit better. Now if I walk up to about 1.5 feet apart, now you're going to hear me a whole lot better. And usually when you're holding the camera, you're going to be about this distance apart, to maybe a little closer, so like this. So if you're talking, you've got the camera, you're talking to your son or anybody else, it's going to pick up your audio perfectly fine. All right, let's see how it handles at distance. So here I am back at 3 feet again. Now let's go back a little bit. So right now this takes me back to about 6 feet, right about here. And let's keep going. About 7 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet. Do I hit a tree? No, I didn't hit a tree this time. This is good, but I'm probably out of focus because I'm not visible. So here I am about 10 feet away from the Rode VideoMic Pro. Now I'm crouching down a little bit because the mic at this distance is actually aiming at right about here. So to see if it makes a difference. So here I am, the mic's aimed right at my face, and if I stand up, it is not. All right, let's go all the way back to about 15 feet here. So now I'm 15 feet away from the Rode VideoMic Pro. It has to go through some leaves. And this is its direct path to me right here. So how does this sound? I'm at 15 feet away in direct line of sight from the Rode VideoMic Pro right about here. So this is what the Sennheiser MKE400 sounds like. I'm about 3 feet away. The settings are a little bit different than the Rode. Now the Rode has that dB level, which this one doesn't. So as far as the camera goes, I'm using full automatic on the sound. I'm not drilling down the preamp at all. The camera's completely handling that. But I do have some other settings that allows me to adjust how the audio is. Now one thing about the Sennheiser, as you can see right here, when you go to turn it on, turn it to the middle, and what it does, it turns on a low pass wind sensitivity or wind filter. And this other one here is microphone sensitivity. The minus is actually considered normal, whereas the plus means it's to, you know, heighten sensitivity. So if your subject's further away or if they're talking quietly, it's recommended. I generally just leave it on the minus, and if I'm shooting outside and there's any sort of wind, or if I'm running or anything like that, I'll have the microphone sensitivity on, or sorry, the wind filter on. It really doesn't impact a whole lot in terms of producing terrible sound. Quite often what I do in post is I also add a bit of a score to it, so everything usually sounds pretty good, even though I would say that the Rode has a bit more of a full sound than the Sennheiser. So here we are, we're about 3 feet away. Now I'm going to walk around to the side. Now as I walk around to the side, you're going to notice that, once again, the audio falls off significantly. So I'm not going to stay on the side too long because you just won't be able to hear me. Then I'm going to go to the back. So here we go, walking around to the side at 90 degrees right here. You can probably barely hear me. So I'm going to continue walking to the rear of the microphone. And here I am, again, 3 feet away. I'm going to walk up to about 1 foot away, because this is pretty similar to the distance you would have the camera if you are recording your own run and gun stuff. All right, before I do the distance test, remember these are super cardioid microphones. That means they're focusing on directly what's in front. They will pick up some noise behind and some noise to the side, and both of these really reduces the amount of noise on the side. And actually the Rode, if you've noticed it, will actually pick up a bit more audio behind it and for a further distance. And if you actually look at the manual, you look at where it shows its profile, you can definitely see that the Sennheiser is focusing on everything in the front, although it does pick up a pretty good ambient sound, and it is not as full sounding as the Rode. All right, so let's walk back for a distance test. There we go, I'm at about 6 feet now. And keep going back to where I'm about 8 feet. I'm around 8 feet right here, and then when I walk, don't hit the tree, I'm at about 10 feet. Again, I'm going to come down a little bit because the mic is pointing downwards. So this is pretty well head on, so let's go back up. Does it drop off at all? Now I'm going to go back full extended as far as this cord will allow me to go. And where I hit the shed, this wooden shed, I'm about 15 feet away. And let me come down a little bit here. So this way, the microphone, you can barely see me in the frame, but the way the shotgun microphone is aimed, right about here should have me in peak audio. So how well does it sound between the shotgun Sennheiser and the shotgun Rode VideoMic Pro? All right, so now I'm recording outside with the Rode VideoMic Pro. I've set it to 0 dB, and I've set the camera to automatic because that's what I'm going to do with the Sennheiser. Now currently I'm walking with the wind, which is somewhere between 6 and 25 miles an hour. And kilometers, that's about 10 to 40 kilometers an hour. Now as I turn sideways to the wind, which is about 90 degrees, you can hear that it picks up a little bit. Now the settings on the top, I do have it set to the filter on, so that will help a little bit. And now let's turn right into the wind. You can hear it picks up quite a bit more. You can hear that bass. It's a little more noticeable. And I find that this is kind of hard to work with when you're doing fun and gun stuff. It tends to take over quite a bit. I find that I end up using the Sennheiser MKE400 when it's windy outside, but the VideoMic Pro works really good when it's not windy, so that's kind of why I have both mics. All right, let's turn sideways so it's not as bad here. And again, if I walk with the wind, it's not nearly as bad. And I know what you're thinking, well, Simon, then just shoot away from the wind. It solves your problem, right? Really? You obviously don't have kids. Okay, or any subject that's moving. When you're doing run and gun stuff, you're following the subject. You're pointing the lens at the subject, which means you're pointing the microphone at the subject. So when you have some pretty heavy wind like this, it takes over. It's It's annoying, it's frustrating, it's unusable. Usually what I do if I'm out shooting with this and the wind picks up, I detach the audio and I toss it away. All right, let's hear how the Sennheiser MKE400 sounds. The Sennheiser MKE400 has a wind low pass filter on the back, which I do not have on. I want to replicate the type of sound that this gives as close to the Rode VideoMic Pro as I can. Later on in this test, I'll go ahead and turn that low pass wind filter on so you can tell the difference. Now I'm walking sideways to the wind. The wind speeds are still about the same. It's actually gusting pretty good right now at about 20 kilometers an hour, about 12 miles an hour. Now if I turn directly into the wind, you can hear the wind noise there. Now notice the difference between the Sennheiser and the Rode. The wind actually sounds a bit more like wind. But you also notice there's a whole lot less bass there. Again, I'm walking sideways now. There's definitely less bass. And in fact, I don't mind the wind noise here. Yes, I do sound a little thin, but I can pick this up in post. That's the nice thing about the sound coming out of the Sennheiser when there's wind. You can edit in post, you can play around with it, you're not clipping. Whereas the Rode, I just find, is unusable in the wind. Right, let's turn directly into it again, into the wind. Now this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage the low pass wind filter. So here we go. It's right in the middle, there we go. So you'll notice a huge change. Like the wind really drops off, but listen to how my voice sounds. It sounds a little bit more tinny, a little bit more thin. But there might be times where this is an option for you. You're outside, you're in gale force winds, you need to capture it for whatever reason. It's going to do it for you. Now I'm going to turn it back off again, so it's just on, the low pass filter's off. And I don't mind the sound of wind. I think it adds to the environment. It is part of the environment. It sets the emotion, the scene. But like anything, like color, you overdo saturation, you overdo brightness, you overdo audio, you overdo anything. It takes away from the story you're trying to tell. So for me, when it comes to shooting outside, I like the Sennheiser when it comes to wind. If it's a quiet day, in terms of wind, I don't expect any wind, it's a sunny day, I might take my chances with a Sennheiser. But there is a problem with the Sennheiser, and it's a big one. Let's first talk about the Rode VideoMic Pro. Now the Rode VideoMic Pro has a very good suspension system on the base. You plug it in and you can shake the camera around like this and it's not going to rattle. Now you probably heard some rattling. The Sennheiser MKE400, its suspension system, well, it looks pretty good. It's terrible. If you move it too much, it clicks. It really does click. And I find that really annoying. But I did find a workaround for it. And it involves the 50-cent washer, well, two 50-cent washers and electrical tape. And what I do, I simply take that one washer, wrap it in electrical tape, and slide it between the mic itself and the first level of the suspension. Then once, I've attached the microphone securely to the camera, I take the other washer, which I cut in half, or I cut at one point, and I wrap it around the base, and that eliminates the noise. I know. So this is one of the reasons why I do have both mics. The Sennheiser does really well in wind, as you can tell right now. It's pretty windy out here. But the Rode has a more full sound. And when there isn't wind, I'd like to use the Rode, and indoors the Rode works really well. But in windy conditions, the Sennheiser's just that much better. Anyhow, my arms are falling off my shoulder, so let's take it back to the studio to wrap up this review. The Sennheiser MKE400 and the Rode VideoMic Pro, they both have similar polar patterns. Now the Rode picks up better in the rear, while the Sennheiser has more forward strength. And without any wind noise, both mics do a really good job at capturing your subjects while reducing noise from the left and the right of the mic. Although the Rode is a little bit stronger behind the mic, so where you would be holding the camera, it's going to pick you up a whole lot more. But the Sennheiser is the clear winner when it comes to dealing with wind noise. Now, even with the wind filter turned off, and again, that's this little button here, the one we used to turn on, turn it all the way over, and the microphone is on, but turn it to the first stop, and that's the low pass wind filter. But there's one problem. and it's to do with the Sennheiser suspension system. So first of all, let's take a look at the suspension system on this one here. I can move it about. Well, once it's securely in place, you can move it about. You're not going to hear any noise. You hear that? Nothing. Okay, now let's try with the Sennheiser. Now with the Sennheiser, I'm going to screw it all the way down here. So this is where it's touching to the camera. And listen to this. You hear that? It's quite distinct. Now you heard that in the video as well. And now, let's be fair. I shot that entire video, and other than when I shook the camera, we didn't hear any of that clicking sound, but that clicking sound is very evident. And where it's evident is if you're moving the camera aggressively. So you might be walking really fast, you might be running or jogging or some other movement where it's moving quite a bit. So you want to watch out for that. Now, as I said at the beginning, and this wasn't any joke, I've got a couple of washers. There's this one here, and this one here I've already taped up, and it's got some electrical tape on it. And what I do is right in here at the top, I secure it there so it can't wobble around. And then once it's secured onto the camera, I take the other one and I put it around like that. And then, as you'll hear, quite a bit reduced. I mean, you really have to shake it to get some noise. $200, and I have to fiddle around with that, and it's really, really frustrating. But both mics produce really good sound, but one thing you definitely notice is with the Rode VideoMic Pro, you get a bit more of a full sound. You get more bass. I think they fiddled with the EQ in somehow because you just get that more rich sound. But that same rich sound works against you with wind. Now again, you can fiddle with the settings, so you can put this high pass filter on. You can also change the recording 0 dB or plus 20 dB, but then you have to remember to go into your camera and make the settings there in manual, or you're going to have all sorts of problems. I really do like the Rode VideoMic Pro. It does really well. But if I'm going to be shooting outside, I'm going to use the Sennheiser. I've used this for 7 years, and the only reason I bought the Rode, I don't know what it is, but my wife thought it was a really good idea to lay the camera down with this on top. Sorry, this one here on top. And what that eventually did is it snapped it. And I don't let my wife touch my cameras anymore because she always does. She puts it down on top. I don't know why. But it produces really good sound. And the dead cat, look at this. Click off. Click on, right? Simple. There's no getting it wrong as to how it goes on. Very simple. Now the Rode, I did buy the dead cat for this one, and it's not like you take this off and put something else on. It's like putting a sock on your foot. And what happens is as you bring it back, there's a piece of Velcro that covers it like this, but there's a little bit of area where wind can gather, and right a bit on top there's a little bit of an oval. And what happened is the wind comes, it comes over top, and it creates vortices. And if you're going with the wind, it's really not that bad at all. But if you're off to the side or you're going into the wind, it's just absolutely terrible. And I know the Sennheiser can sound a little thin, especially with the wind filter on. With the wind filter on, it's very, very thin. But I record outside with the wind filter off. And yes, there's a bit of noise, but once you fiddle with the EQ and post, you can actually get a very complimentary sound. You can hear the subject talking quite well, or in the case of my son running around, you can hear him quite well, and the wind just becomes part of the background. It's not really harsh like it is with the Rode. So if I had to choose between these two mics, which one would I pick? Well, it's easy. I'd go with the Sennheiser MKE400. Yes, it's got some problems. It's got a suspension problem. That's definitely in need of an upgrade. This microphone's been on the market for a long time, and they haven't done anything to do with it. But it does perform well inside and out, and with wind or not. And that's really one of the great things about this. Even without the wind filter, it grabs really good audio. And with the wind filter, it pretty much eliminates most of the wind. But that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe for your chance to win the Synco Lav S6E and M3 shotgun microphones. I'll be awarding these two microphones once the channel reaches 20,000 subscribers. And then, for every 10,000 subscribers after that, I'll be awarding a different and more expensive prize until this channel reaches 100,000 subscribers, at which point I'm going to be awarding the Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera. It's going to be a brand new Canon EOS R5. And on that bombshell, thanks for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you have any questions regarding this video at all, pop them in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.